Hi everyone, Stone Crypto here, bringing back to you some more rock-solid crypto tutorial content. Today's topic, I'll be going over crypto supplemental learning and foundation building. And I'll start off our episode by talking about crypto education and why crypto education is so important. Because if you're not getting into the space for the right reasons, for the technology and innovation that is coming from blockchain and smart contracts, then you're not going to be able to have those steady hands and keep calm during massive dips like the ones that we're going through right now. I also want to emphasize on the importance of building a solid foundation while you're learning about the crypto space, because if you don't have a solid foundation, then a lot of the things in the crypto economy about cryptocurrencies will not make sense to you. And I want to emphasize on building those foundations by going a little bit into explaining about central banks, why they're important in our legacy system, the fiat currencies, as well as our debt-based financial system. So to start off with, keeping calm and educating yourself on the blockchain smart contract technology, nothing has changed. All the benefits of blockchain and smart contract technology are still valid. It makes things cheaper, faster, borderless, and more secure. And if you aren't learning about these things, about decentralized blockchain, smart contract technology, how it reduces overhead, increases efficiency, and you just end up buying coins without even doing any research because you've seen it on TV on CNBC or heard it from a friend, coins like Ripple, Tron, or Cardano, then you're really, you're doing yourself a disservice because you're buying something you don't understand. And when you don't understand it, when prices drop significantly like they do in the crypto space very, very often, then you're going to panic and then you're going to sell. And if you do understand a lot of this information, you should be educating other people that you know that are in this space, because if you're not educating them, their weekends affect our economy as well, and then ultimately that does a disservice on yourself when massive amounts of people that don't understand what cryptocurrencies are, blockchain technology, smart contracts, and in particular their coins that they're holding, that they're buying, that they're leaving on exchanges. A lot of people are leaving their coins on exchanges. These last 2 to 3 months have had a massive influx of very uneducated people in cryptocurrencies. So these people need to educate themselves. You guys need to help educate them. And education is what is going to fix a lot of the problems that are going on in this space, because people don't know how to send coins right now. People don't know how to download wallets. And people don't know how to store their private keys. A lot of this is basic information that we should all know, and that does not come without education, whether it's educating yourself or educating others. So what are central banks and why are they important? So central banks are banks that determine the interest rates, the monetary supply, and the inflation rates of that particular country. Most major nations have central banks, and the central banks are privately owned and independent from government and treasury, as a lot of times the government and the treasury will have goals specific to the government and the treasury, and they can end up trying to print dollars or print their currency if they need more. And if they're doing that kind of inflates the currency supply. So you want to keep your central bank separate from the government. At least that was the idea, so that the government cannot influence the monetary supply of the country. But unfortunately, our government, or the US government, has significant influence over the monetary supply that is controlled by the US central bank. So it kind of makes that point moot. Also, these interest rates that are set by these central banks are used by our traditional banks like JP Morgan or Citibank, HSBC. These banks borrow based off the interest rates set by the central banks of their countries, and then they lend to us at a markup. So what that means is we as consumers cannot borrow from the government directly. If the government comes out, let's say the U.S. Federal Reserve comes out and says that they've set interest rates a 1/4% higher, and now they're 1.5%. You cannot go out there and borrow from the government at that 1.5% or borrow from that bank at 1.5%. Those banks go directly to the government and borrow at 1.5%, and then they lend to you at a markup to make their money. So you're borrowing from the bank at 2.25%. So that's how kind of the whole interest rates and central banks kind of fall in line with the individual consumer. And the U.S. Central Bank is known as the Federal Reserve. It hasn't been audited in over 100 years. And an interesting point, slightly related to central banks, is the U.S. has about 4,583 metric tons of gold reserves, valued at over $100 billion. And these gold reserves haven't been audited in a very long time either. So next we have, what is fiat money and the debt-based financial system? Fiat is basically unbacked government declared legal tender, money that your government legally recognizes as money that they can accept and that you're allowed to use. So in the USA, our fiat money is US dollars. In the UK, it's British pounds. In Europe, it's mostly euros, and so on and so on. And fiat is paper unbacked money, because our money used to be backed by gold and silver until the 1970s, when President Nixon took the entire world off of the gold standard and put everyone on the US dollar standard, the petrodollar. And there's been a lot of anomalies around gold and silver reserves since the 70s. There's been a lack of transparency and delay tactics around requests of information around US gold reserves. And those numbers really haven't been adding up. And a lot of people have speculations as to whether or not the gold held in reserve by the US is really there. And we'll move on to the debt-based financial system now. So with all this fiat money and paper money, the reason why we were taken off of the gold standard is because the government did not have the ability to create more money without having gold to back each new dollar that was created. So that's why they took us off the gold standard, and they didn't need to have those gold and silver ounces and coins to back the new dollars that are being created now, because it's just paper that's printed. It's unbacked paper that's printed that we have over 1 trillion paper dollars of. And when you print more of this money, printing the money decreases the value of that money by inflating the supply of that currency, and ultimately results in decreasing the purchasing power. That's why you've heard of stories back, in the probably when your grandparents are born, or your great grandparents, that you could probably buy a house off of a few years' salary. You could easily buy a car. You could buy a lot of things were cheaper back then. But because of inflation, because the fact that we've been consistently printing money longer and longer, it's decreased the purchasing power of our dollar. And now, even with a married couple's combined annual salary for 5, 10, maybe even 15 years, you still can't buy a house in full. So this leads us to the debt-based financial system, with homes which lead to mortgages that shackle you into 30 years of debt. When you try to buy a car, you're locked into 5 years of debt that are, some auto loans are going for 6, 7, 8 years now. If you want to get an education, you're going to have to be paying off your student loans probably for the rest of your life. And then now you have 401ks that are pretty much locking up your entire savings until you're 65, or maybe even older, until you can take this out. And those 401ks are meant to prop up the financial system, meant to prop up the stock market, because if you aren't contributing to these markets, then those systems will not be able to survive. And that's why they punish you to force you to stay into these systems until you're 60 something years old. And lastly, our debt-based financial system requires you to have credit. And you can't build any credit without incurring debt. It's like asking somebody to, you can't contribute to society unless you take some drugs. These drugs are really addictive. You get a lot of things that you should not be having, such as credit cards and with balances that are higher than the income that you make. And they expect you to manage these things when you're teenagers, when you're 18 years old. And if you don't do it, you cannot be a part of society. So it's this debt-based financial system that you need to understand well, because it ties into the decentralization of cryptocurrencies. So that's it for today's episode. If you guys like this particular episode, feel free to like, subscribe, and follow Stone Crypto for updates. And we'll catch you guys on the next episode.